My name is Emily Carter, and I always believed that my father knew exactly what kind of people his children would become. My brother Daniel was confident, charming, and ambitious. I was quieter. I worked hard, saved money, and avoided unnecessary attention. Dad used to joke that Daniel could sell sand in the desert, while I would probably ask for 3 receipts before buying a bottle of water. We laughed about it. But there was one thing we never laughed about. Money. Dad had built his construction company from nothing. By the time he was 65, he owned several properties, investment accounts, and a beautiful house where our family had spent every Christmas since I was a child. Daniel always assumed that one day everything would be his. He never said it directly. But whenever Dad discussed the business, Daniel would say things like, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of it when you're ready." Dad would simply smile. Then one winter morning, Dad died unexpectedly. The funeral was difficult. But what happened afterward was even harder. 3 weeks later, our family gathered at the office of Dad's lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Mom sat beside me. Daniel sat across from us. He looked unusually relaxed. Almost too relaxed. Mr. Harrison placed several folders on the table. "Your father left a detailed estate plan." Daniel smiled. "I figured he did." The lawyer began reading. "The family residence will remain in your mother's name." Mom nodded. "The investment portfolio will be divided according to the trust agreement." Daniel leaned forward. Then came the sentence he'd been waiting for. "The primary inheritance account, containing approximately $2 million, will be transferred to Daniel Carter." Daniel smiled. I watched him closely. He leaned back. $2 million. Mr. Harrison nodded. "Approximately." Daniel laughed softly. "Wow." Mom reached for his hand. "Your father would have wanted you to have it." Daniel looked at me. For a moment, I thought he might say something kind. Instead, he smiled. "You know, Emily, Dad always said I'd make something of myself." I nodded. "I'm happy for you." And I meant it. At least, I thought I did. Then Mr. Harrison closed the folder. Daniel stood. "Is that everything?" The lawyer looked at him. "No." Daniel stopped. "What?" Mr. Harrison picked up another document. "There is one final page." Daniel laughed. "Another inheritance." "No." Mr. Harrison's expression became serious. "It concerns the $2 million account." Daniel's smile disappeared. "What about it?" The lawyer looked directly at him. "Before the funds can be released, you must acknowledge the conditions written on the final page." Daniel frowned. "What conditions?" Mr. Harrison slid the document toward him. Daniel glanced at it. "It's just legal language." "Then read it." Daniel shrugged. "I'll have my attorney review it." Mr. Harrison nodded. "That's your choice." Daniel signed the first documents. Then he stood. "Congratulations," he said to himself. He shook my hand. "Looks like Dad believed in me after all." I smiled. But as Daniel walked toward the door, Mr. Harrison quietly said, "Daniel." He turned. "Yes?" The lawyer looked at the final page. Then at him. "Are you absolutely certain you want to leave without reading this?" Daniel laughed. "Mr. Harrison, it's $2 million. What could possibly be wrong?" The lawyer didn't smile. "That's exactly what your father wanted you to ask." Daniel left. I stayed behind. I looked at Mr. Harrison. "What's on that page?" He sighed. "I can't tell you." "Why?" "Because your father specifically instructed me not to reveal its contents, unless Daniel refuses to read it." I stared at him. So Dad knew he wouldn't read it. Mr. Harrison looked toward the door. He knew your brother very well. That evening, Daniel called me. His voice was excited. Emily. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect. I smiled. Congratulations. I'm finally going to buy that house. What house? The lake house Dad always talked about. That's expensive. I can afford it now. I hesitated. Are you sure you should spend so much immediately? Daniel laughed. You're still the cautious one. Maybe. Relax. I'm going to enjoy my inheritance. I wished him good night. Then I sat alone in my living room. Dad's words came back to me. Promise me you'll stay calm when the time comes. He had said that 6 months before his death. At the time, I didn't understand. Now I wondered whether he had been preparing me for this exact moment. 2 days later, Daniel sent me a photograph. It showed a luxury car. Underneath it, he wrote, "First purchase." I replied, "You really don't waste time." He sent a laughing emoji. Then another message appeared. Dad wanted me to enjoy his money. I didn't respond. Something about the whole situation didn't feel right. That afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Harrison. "Emily, can you come to my office?" "Why?" "I need to show you something." When I arrived, he had the same final page on his desk. Daniel hasn't returned. No. He hasn't contacted you. He thinks the money is already his. Mr. Harrison nodded. That's what your father expected. I looked at the document. Please tell me what it says. He shook his head. I can't. Then why did you call me? He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old envelope. My name was written on it. Emily. My heart began beating faster. Your father left this with me. When? 2 years ago. I stared at him. Why? Mr. Harrison answered quietly. He told me to give it to you only after Daniel received the inheritance. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. I recognized Dad's handwriting immediately. I began reading. Emily, if you're holding this letter, then Daniel has probably already received the inheritance. I stopped. Mr. Harrison watched silently. I continued. I know your brother will be excited. I also know he may not read everything before signing. My heart sank. That is why I need you to remember something. Money reveals character, but responsibility reveals the heart. I wiped away a tear. Then I reached the final paragraph. If Daniel reads the last page, he will understand why I left him the $2 million. If he doesn't. The sentence ended there. I looked up. What does that mean? Mr. Harrison said nothing. I turned the page. There was one final handwritten line. The inheritance was never meant to reward Daniel. I stared at it. Then my phone rang. It was Daniel. I answered. Hello. His voice sounded different. Emily. What happened? I went back to the lawyer's office. My heart stopped. Why? There was a long silence. Then he whispered. Mr. Harrison said the money isn't actually mine yet. I sat up. What do you mean? Daniel took a breath. He asked me one question. What question? Daniel's voice trembled. He asked. Did you read the last page? I couldn't speak. Then Daniel said. I told him no. Another silence. And now he's telling me I have until tomorrow morning. Until tomorrow for what? Daniel answered. To decide whether I still want the $2 million. I stared at Dad's letter. Suddenly, I understood. The inheritance wasn't the mystery. The last page was. And whatever Dad had written there was powerful enough to make Daniel question whether he wanted the money at all. I drove to Daniel's apartment that night. When he opened the door, he looked completely different. The confidence was gone. What happened? I asked. He stepped aside. Come in. On his table was the inheritance document. The final page was still attached. Daniel pointed at it. I thought it was just another legal condition. What does it say? I haven't read it. I stared at him. Then read it. He shook his head. I'm afraid. That surprised me. Daniel was never afraid of money. He was afraid of losing it. I sat beside him. Maybe Dad wanted you to read it before you made a decision. Daniel slowly picked up the document. His hands were shaking. He began reading. The first paragraph said, "The $2 million inheritance will belong to Daniel only if he accepts the responsibility attached to it." Daniel frowned. Responsibility. He continued. Daniel must use the inheritance to settle the outstanding obligations of Carter Construction and preserve the company for the next 5 years. He looked at me. 5 years. I nodded. Keep reading. The next paragraph made his face go pale. If Daniel sells, transfers, or uses the company assets for personal luxury purchases before the 5-year period ends, the inheritance will automatically be transferred into the Carter family trust. Daniel slowly put the paper down. The car. I looked at him. What about it? I already bought the car. My heart sank. With your inheritance. He nodded. But the money hasn't been released yet. We both became silent. Then Daniel whispered. Dad knew. Apparently. He looked at the document again. There's more. He continued reading. The beneficiary of the family trust is Emily Carter. I froze. What? Daniel looked at me. You're the beneficiary. I couldn't speak, then he read the final paragraph. Emily is not to interfere with Daniel's decisions unless the company or the inheritance is placed at serious risk. Daniel laughed bitterly. So Dad made you my safety net. I shook my head. No. He made me your backup plan. Daniel looked down. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he asked. Why would Dad do this? I answered honestly. Because he knew you. Daniel smiled sadly. That's fair. The next morning, we returned to Mr. Harrison's office. Daniel carried the document in his hand. Mr. Harrison looked at him. Did you read the last page? Daniel nodded. Yes. And? Daniel placed the document on the desk. I accept the conditions. Mr. Harrison looked surprised. You understand what you're agreeing to? Yes. You can't use the inheritance however you want. I know. You'll have to manage the company responsibly. Daniel nodded. I know. Mr. Harrison smiled. Then your father was right. Daniel frowned. About what? He believed you could become the man he knew you were capable of becoming. Daniel looked away. His eyes became wet. I wish he'd told me that. Mr. Harrison quietly replied. He did. Daniel looked confused. Every time he refused to rescue you, he was trying to tell you. That sentence stayed with Daniel. 3 months later, everything had changed. Daniel sold the expensive car. He paid off the company's immediate obligations. He stopped taking money from the business for personal expenses. He even started arriving at work before most of the employees. One evening, he called me. Emily. Yeah. I think I finally understand Dad. What? He wasn't trying to keep the money from me. I smiled. He was trying to make sure you were ready for it. Daniel laughed. I hated that man sometimes. I smiled. You loved him too. Yeah. There was a pause. Emily. Yes. Thank you. For what? For not taking advantage of the situation. I shook my head. I didn't do anything. You could have. He was right. Dad had left me control over the trust. I could have used that power against Daniel. But I didn't. Because Dad's real lesson wasn't about inheritance. It was about responsibility. 5 years later, Carter Construction was stronger than ever. Daniel had become a respected businessman. Not because Dad left him $2 million. But because Dad had forced him to learn what $2 million actually meant. One evening, Daniel and I stood outside the old family house. He handed me a small envelope. What's this? Something Dad left for you. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of the three of us. Dad, Daniel, and me. On the back were 6 handwritten words. You were always worth more than money. I smiled through my tears. Daniel looked at me. I think that's the real inheritance. I nodded. It is. And that was the day I finally understood why Dad had asked one simple question before everything began. Did you read the last page? Because sometimes the most important part of an inheritance isn't what you're given. It's what you're expected to become. 5 years had passed since Dad's death. Daniel had changed. The reckless brother who once believed money could solve every problem was now running Carter Construction with discipline and patience. I was proud of him. But there was still one question neither of us had answered. Why had Dad created the inheritance conditions in the first place? One evening, Daniel called me. Emily, I found something in Dad's old office. What? A locked drawer. My heart skipped. Did you open it? No. I need you here. The next morning, we met at the old family house. Daniel showed me the drawer. It was hidden behind a row of accounting books. The tiny silver key Dad had given me years earlier fit perfectly. Click. The drawer opened. Inside was a single envelope. On it were 3 words. For both children. Daniel looked at me. Ready? I nodded. Inside was a letter. My dear Emily and Daniel. If you're reading this together, then something wonderful has happened. You stayed family. Daniel looked down. Children. Daniel looked at me. Ready? I nodded. Inside was a letter. My dear Emily and Daniel. If you're reading this together, then something wonderful has happened. You stayed family. Daniel looked down. I continued reading. The $2 million was never the real inheritance. The company was never the real inheritance either. I wanted to leave you something money could never buy. I paused. Daniel whispered, keep going. I wanted you to learn that fairness doesn't always mean receiving the same thing. Emily, you learned responsibility early. Daniel, you needed the opportunity to learn it. Daniel wiped his eyes. Then came the final paragraph. There is one final asset I never included in the estate documents. I looked at Daniel. What? We turned the page. Dad had written an address. It was an old warehouse on the other side of town. We drove there that afternoon. Inside, we found something neither of us expected. Hundreds of boxes. Construction plans. Old photographs. Company records. And at the back of the warehouse was a sign. Carter Community Foundation. Daniel stared at it. What is this? I found another letter. Dad had created the foundation years before his death. Its purpose was to provide housing assistance and scholarships to families who couldn't afford them. And the money came from the profits of Carter Construction. Daniel looked at me. Dad never told anyone. I smiled. That sounds like him. Then we found the final document. Dad had left control of the foundation to both of us. Not one. Both. Daniel laughed. So after all these years, he still found a way to make us work together. I smiled. Apparently. We stood silently in that warehouse. For years, we'd thought Dad's greatest legacy was the company. Or the house. Or the millions. We were wrong. His greatest legacy was the lesson he had forced us to learn. Money could create competition. Power could create resentment. But responsibility could bring people together. Daniel looked at me. You know what? What? I don't want Dad's money anymore. I laughed. That's a little late. He smiled. I mean, I don't want it to define me. I nodded. Then Dad succeeded. That evening, we returned to the family house. We sat on the porch where Dad used to drink his coffee. Daniel raised his glass. To Dad. I raised mine. To Dad. Then he added. And to the last page. I smiled. Because that final page had changed everything. Daniel thought Dad had left him $2 million. But Dad had left him something much more valuable. A second chance. And he had left me something too. The courage to stop protecting my family with silence. And start protecting it with honesty. Sometimes an inheritance is money. Sometimes it's property. Sometimes it's a business. But sometimes, the greatest inheritance is a lesson that stays with you for the rest of your life. Dad left us millions. But he also left us something money could never buy. Each other.